Hello, everybody. Thank you for putting up with some time delays today. I had thought that I would be available earlier to do the stream. I was not. So I'm starting it a little later than I would have liked to, but I'll wait a couple minutes before getting started. As before with film club that I did for Palestine Bookshelf, the question will be how many people are coming. This is, after all, a book review channel, so it may take some people off guard to do film reviews. So if there's a good response, then we'll keep going, and if there's not a good response, then I'll leave it be as a failed experiment. All right, so we'll get started. Firstly, I hope that you had an opportunity to see this film. At the very least, see the trailer. It is a beautiful film, Lakota Nation versus the United States, and it's one that I actually started when I was on a flight and I was just peeking through the documentaries. This looked really interesting. And I got about an hour. I think I started it quite late into the flight because I only watched an hour of it. And I thought, I definitely have to come back to this. And I did, thankfully. And I thought, well, as long as I'm watching it, I might as well discuss it with the channel. So that's what I'm going to do today. Now, ideally, you all have had a chance to watch the film and you have questions, ideas, things that you want to share, I'd love to bring you into the conversation. This is a little different from my regular book reviews in which I just read you things. This is more of hopefully a conversation, but that'll have to depend on whether you actually had a chance to see the film. So I'm going to start with things that I really loved about the film. Firstly, very well shot, beautiful. For those of you who've been to those parts of the United States, Montana, Wyoming, the Dakotas, it's gorgeous, and one can see why people are attached to that land. Um, Something else that you'll notice about it is it's not very inhabited, and I think there's a great, potentially poetic justice, irony, however you want to look at it, in that the way that um, the Lakota or the Sioux, if you refer to them that way, either is acceptable. I think the uh, Lakota had a mechanism by which land was stolen from them in which they were parceled out. Say you get 160 acres and you get 160 acres, and once every person had gotten 160 acres, there was still, I wrote this down, an enormous amount that was still, yeah, 90 million acres was still able to be effectively stolen and given to settlers. Those settlers then built farms, which then over time, or ranches that got eaten up by big agriculture. And so there's not a lot of people who live there anymore. And it's somewhat reverted to how it was prior to the Dawes Act, prior to these treaties, basically beautiful uninhabited land with Indian reservations, and not a lot of people. The people tend to congregate in the cities. And when I've been out to some of these places, it's remarkable that it's somewhat come back to that, the way. Now, part of what I love about the film is the music behind it. It's mournful, beautiful. It uses native instruments, so you could hear that native instrumentation alongside, you could say, modern sensibilities. And I think that the director, whoever had the vision for how the movie was going to be put together, has a lot of respect for the viewer. I think a lot of times in modern documentaries, with how distracted people are, they feel the need to draw signs and arrows and put up graphics and tell the listener, this is what you're supposed to know, this is what you're supposed to learn. But this film, and I'll tell you, there's a particular moment towards the end of the film in which they're talking about their worship of the sun god in their traditional religion, and how they plan to carry this forward into the 21st century and beyond. And there is a momentary flash of solar panels on a roof somewhere, and a discussion about how they plan to take this forward and to keep be a conservator of the land, but also have economic benefit for their community. And they didn't have to tell you. They didn't say, "P.S. It's gonna be through solar power." They just trusted the viewer to be intelligent enough to pick up on that 2 3 second visual cue. Blink and you miss it. So I really appreciated the beauty of the landscape, the music that it was set to, and the um, just the sober nature of the people who have appeared and shared their story with us and told us about their areas of expertise, gave us historical context, and realistically, they managed to cover a great deal of Native history in a very short period and to give people windows into different things that you want to look at. So, if you want to look specifically at the court case, they have the son of the lawyer who won the court case on behalf of the Sioux uh, on in the documentary. And there's a book that's related to that, a book that I ordered, which I'll be looking at. There's some relation to the Dawes Act and how unjust that was and how that eventually got overturned. There's a chance for you to look at historical enactments and the fact that the Crow Indians, who are allied with the U.S. forces at that time, they're the ones doing the reenactment because the Lakota don't want to have anything to do with it. And I've been out to Little Bighorn, not for a reenactment, but I was out there to learn about the battlefield and go. And it's a very, as all battlefields are, it's a very sobering place. And at each part of the battlefield, as different actions took place, and you say, okay, well, Custer came up from this valley, um, it's sobering because you think about how much of American history turns on this battle. If you picked it up in the documentary, there was an allusion to the fact that Americans were shocked by this. Well, we have put those Indians back in their place. Let's go take all their land. Was a big reaction to the fact that they had simply reacted to what Custer was doing, and how America would write a treaty that says this is the land, this is your land forever. In typical SpongeBob fashion. A few moments later, gold is discovered, and then we decided that forever meant until we discovered gold, and then forever just means until we can extract all that gold. You don't get any of it, and I think there are so many missed opportunities. There's so many times in which you can look at turning points in history and ask yourself, why is it not possible to share? This idea that not only do I have to move in, okay, fine, we can move in. This land's pretty big. We can live here. No, I'm not only going to move in, I'm going to take everything. Not only going to take everything, I'm going to take everything that would help you be subsistent. So I'm going to put you inside these borders, fine. I'm going to promise you money and then not give you that money. I'm going to take your children, put them in boarding school and teach them to hate everything about their heritage. I'm going to kill the buffalo, which was your primary source of food, of making jewelry, making clothing, medicine. We're going to kill all of those and then lead you to be dependent upon us. So it's not enough. If it was just a simple question of you have some land and I have some land and let's see how we do, that would be one thing. But that isn't what happened. It's we're going to take all of the land, you're going to have nothing, and then we're going to cheat you at every turn. And the small inkling that came through the court case, which is alluded to in the title of the documentary, and we get to at the end, is the sense that sometimes justice does prevail and it takes a long time. But even then, the question is that what they really want? And the principled stand of we don't want the money, we want the land back. And if you've been up there and you've been to Little Bighorn or you've been to the Black Hills, which are absolutely gorgeous, you can see that the land can be given back without too much difficulty because of the precedent that's been established with reservations. The reservations throughout the United States have their own sort of internal government and autonomy. And if these lands were returned, they could simply be turned into reservation lands. It doesn't mean that all the white people have to be expelled. It doesn't mean that all of their land is going to be confiscated. In the movie, they gave a quote that said, "Oh, you're going to do to us what we did to you," and they said, "No, that's not the point. The point is this is our land. We want to conserve it. We want to grow it for our people, and you're welcome to stay if you want. And if you don't want to stay, you can leave. But they're not going to be forced out." And hearing some of the testimony that even this mother said, and looking at her face, I think she couldn't have been more than 50 or 60. She said, um, "My child was spit at going to school." And I think this is something in America, you could say the civil rights issue is really always looked at for the Black community. There's not any other issue of like, well, there were other people that were discriminated against, and what does it tie to? And so, more than one of the panelists in the documentary refers to white supremacy. I'm not I don't want to say I'm not comfortable. I don't I because that feels very simplistic to me to just say it's a white supremacy thing because then you can just pigeonhole it. There's a much larger problem in America, which is this question of manifest destiny. So for those of you who are outside of the United States, you probably are not familiar with this term, but it is something that grew up in the American soul, uh, about God destined us to rule over all this territory. Does this sound familiar? And so that it all belongs to us, such that it manifested itself in a couple different ways. One, when Lewis and Clark went on expedition, they were somewhat disappointed about the route of the Columbia River because they needed it to go in a certain direction in order to make a better territorial claim against Britain for the Louisiana Purchase. So on the exploratory side, they wanted more land, and then on the governmental side, there was a political campaign in the United States, and you can go look it up. The slogan was 5440 or fight. 5440 is a latitudinal reference. It is the current northern border of the United States. But what people don't realize is when there was still Canada and there's a question of the Oregon Washington territories, that line actually dipped down. So Canada had part of Washington and Idaho and Montana in part of their territory. 5440 was to draw a straight line over. Americans were very simple creatures. We just want everything to be straight lines. So we wanted a straight line all the way to the coast. The presidential campaign was 5440 or fight, meaning we're going to get that latitude or we're going to fight you. um, get this, America going to war over getting more land. And so people are so shocked. And so that's why I say when it's people say it's a white supremacy, it's not white supremacy because it implies that this is what's driving it is the white race. No, it's this polluted, strange, uh, mixed with weird Protestant theology. God has called us to take over all this land and subdue the backward peoples. Very crazy, weird thing. And then it gets associated with all Americans. But manifest destiny is not normally something that people outside of America would be familiar with. So I just wanted to talk about it a little bit. It's just that idea. Just listen to it. Manifest destiny. It is clear that we are supposed to take over this whole land. And then we're supposed to take over the whole continent and the hemisphere and the world. Do you see where it goes? Manifest destiny is not something that finishes and completes when the United States is taken over. It just keeps going. Then it becomes Cuba and Hawaii and Guam and the Philippines. It just keeps going. So we see that manifested here for the Indians, the Lakota, and there was never a question of sharing. They had to take everything. And not only when they took everything, they had to cheat the people that they made a treaty with. So if you're going to have a treaty and say, all right, we're going to give you some money, you're going to give us some land, fine, that could be done. There's nothing immoral, illegal about that. But the thing is, you have to keep the treaty. So if you're going to make a treaty with somebody and say that you're superior and you're civilized and we have books and look, we have clothing, well then we would expect you to be held to the standard of, okay, well, if you have books and you have clothing and you call yourself Christians, then you should keep your word. Christ doesn't say make a contract with people and then cheat them. That isn't written anywhere in the Gospels. So whatever this is, it has nothing to do with Christianity. I don't know that it has something to do with being white because people cheat each other all around the world. The whites do not have a monopoly on this. And if you looked at other colonial projects, other non-whites have done this. So it's just a strange trend that people just are not content to share. There's no concept of sharing. That's a conversation for another time. I want to stay focused on the Lakota. Um, Hey Sapa, which is the name of the Black Hills in their language. Um, the latest conflict was about Keystone Pipeline. I have not had enough time to do research into the Keystone Pipeline. I don't believe it's wrong to develop natural resources. I do think it's legal and moral to pump oil, but you have to have the agreement of the landowners. And if the landowners say no, then you have to make another choice. So I also really appreciated that they highlighted precedent for giving land back with President Nixon, of all people, President Nixon giving land back to the Taos Pueblo Indians. I think they are in New Mexico. If someone in the chat knows better, please correct me, but I'm pretty sure Taos is in New Mexico, and Blue Lake was given back to them in the 70s by Nixon. So we have precedent in US law for giving land back. And the fact that the Supreme Court has ruled for a judicial payment of the money taken, so it's wrong was done, and we would like to pay you for that wrongdoing. I think an alternative judgment could be, okay, we don't want the money, we want the land. And I think that could be done. So, really fascinated with that. I've seen quite a few chats, so let me try to get to that. Super chat. Wow, I think this is the first super chat for a stream. Mastodon Knots, appreciate your content. Well, thank you. I appreciate the super chat. Thank you for that. Michael H. This is something that bothered me in grade school. Yeah, I don't think it's really something we're aware of. I think those of us in American grade schools, we're taught about the Indians anthropologically. So the Plains Indians rode horses, and these Indians lived in these types of houses, and these Indians cultivated beans or whatever else. These Indians lived in California, but there's not really a discussion. I don't remember it in grade school, and I'm not trying to say that no American students are taught this. I was not taught. I was sent to very fine private schools by my parents, who sacrificed a lot to send me to those schools. And I was not taught the extent until I got to my junior year of high school in America. That's 16, 17 years old, in which my teacher talked about the fact that the Indians had been cheated in so many ways. And then later on, and we'll be talking about it more in some books. Not, I think later this year, I think it's on the schedule, but I'll be talking about that in detail on the channel later this year. The colonizer always fears being colonized themselves. Yeah, I think that's a good point. And I think that's something we can relate back to what we've been talking about with Israel and Palestine is if you're looking at the one democratic state solution, there needs to be a solution in which the Israelis who decide to stay feel comfortable. And that has to be, there has to be a great kindness that is extended. We are not going to do to you what you did to us. We're going to lead with kindness. We're going to lead with love. We're going to lead with charity. And part of that means that you can stay. Here are the rules. Here are the laws. And we're not going to spit on you in public. And if you'd like to stay, please feel free to stay. But this is no longer going to be the Jewish state. And I think that's a model that the Lakota will have if they are given the Black Hills back, that they will say Americans are welcome to stay. U.S. citizens are welcome to stay. They're U.S. citizens themselves. They're dual citizens. They're citizens of the Lakota Nation, and they're also U.S. citizens. But U.S. citizens can choose to stay and be part of the reservation and be part of that life. And it could be an embryo for a new way of our civilizations interacting with each other. And if you look back at what Jefferson said when he signed the Louisiana Purchase, he talked about the idea of there being 2 or 3 other nations. So for those of you who are not from the United States who don't know the Louisiana Purchase is mostly the land west of the Mississippi. Up that way, there's other land that we took from Mexico when we provoked a war with them. That's a different discussion. But Louisiana Purchase is, let's say, a third or more of the United States that was sold. And so from France by Napoleon. And so that Louisiana Purchase portion is really what led Jefferson to say, well, he didn't think this is going to be part of this huge country. He thought there would be 2 or 3 other countries that would form within that Louisiana Purchase. And that makes all the logic in the world. It doesn't make sense to have a large country as it is, which for many people is an incoherent country. You have a country that has New York, Texas, California, and the Dakotas all in the same country. It's an incoherent country for many reasons. But that just the size is one of them. It wasn't presented as a problem. Blame the Indians. Yeah, that was part of it. It's a hyper ego or supremacist logic. Yes and no. Yes and no. As I say, I think white supremacy puts it into this corner and then makes it really oversimplified. There were so many different things going on with the way the Americans thought about themselves. They think God created this country and it's the greatest country ever. Alexis de Tocqueville talks about this, and keep in mind, Alexis de Tocqueville is visiting America in the 1830s. And he's talking about the fact that Americans can't stop going on about how amazing their country is. The country's been around 5 minutes, right? 1830. Um, and yet they still need to tell Europeans, oh, by the way, don't you think we have freedom? And this is just the best country ever. And it's so awesome. They couldn't measure it in their freedom units. Great point, Salim. Um, uh, 1980s grade school, we were on our own, had to go to the library. Yeah, for sure. Um, I'll watch it, but I'm biased already. Well, I don't think the bias will be bad. I think that you'll watch it. I think you'll enjoy it and you'll learn a lot. I certainly did, and there's all sorts of stuff. Um, I'm white or Anglo-Saxons, but I had a problem with it severely. Michael, do you mean you had a problem with the notion of white supremacy, or did you have a notion you have a problem with the colonial project? It's not about being European. The white category is just a tool. Yeah, 100%. I agree with that. So I think I wanted to emphasize how lovely I thought the film was, um, and how much. If those of you who came onto the stream and just wanted to hear me talk, okay, fine. I was hoping that some of you will have seen the film and wanted to share your thoughts as well. It doesn't look like that's the case. That's fine. Remember, this is no obligation. It's just a question of me trying to see if this format works, if you like it, if you respond to it well, if it gets viewed a lot after the broadcast. Which, for those of you who don't know, there is a Palestine bookshelf live stream coming up in about 5 minutes. So I'm going to be ending this stream and starting that stream, and we're going to be talking about the October 7th documentary that was put out by Al Jazeera about 6 months ago. So if you want to continue this conversation, but on a different topic, but let's say in a related topic, how do native populations react to colonizing populations? We'll be doing that in a few minutes on that other stream. Um, I forgot to do the homework next time. Well, I'm trying to give as much notice as possible. I think the thing is about a film, I feel like I can tell somebody you got a week to watch it, because you can, even if you chop it up. So this documentary was 90 minutes. And I thought if someone watched 30 minutes for 3 different nights, they could do it in a week. Whereas if I tell somebody we're going to read this book, and it's a, whatever page book, I don't know what reading speeds people are. So I would never, unless it was, I don't know, like a 50-page book or something like that, a pamphlet, maybe I could do something like that. But we'll see how this goes. As I say, I don't know how people will respond to this. I don't know how the views will be after the stream is over. But thank you all for coming, showing up, hearing me talk about the film. I really want to encourage you to go see it. There should be a link in the description. If not, I'll make sure I add it. But go see it. I'm pretty sure proceeds go towards the Black Hills. It's not the foundation, but there is a working group which is working the legal angle, and I think other advocacy angles, to try to get the land back. So I would encourage you to look at that, consider it, and if you'd like to see more of these streams, tell people in the comment section that you liked it. And you're also free to suggest films. I have about a dozen films that I want to talk about with you all. And they're all part of a larger, greater narrative. They're going to be related to books that we're talking about. So thank you for coming. As I say, if you'd like to watch the other stream that's going to be premiering in a couple minutes, it's on the Palestine Bookshelf channel. So if you haven't subscribed over there, you haven't, just go over to that channel, subscribe, and then go over to the live, and I'll be with you there in a few moments. Again, thanks for joining, and we'll see if this goes on another time. We have a quick last comment. This was good. Keep it up. Thanks for the encouragement. See you soon.